So I'll got it recording thing. Wonderful. All right, so like I said, we're gonna make a few shifts today. So the beginning of the year, we kind of front loaded y'all with a lot of information. We explored the guidebook together. We started talking about assessments and then moved into really the components of structured literacy and how to implement that into a system. But the remaining sessions for the rest of the year are specific to three things: interventions, implementation plans, and professional development plans. So because many of you are kind of working right now to develop a lot of your literacy plans or revise them, or working on your school improvement plans across your districts and schools, we're kind of shifting, and we're going to start the morning by talking about aligning those school improvement efforts with your literacy efforts, and leave you guys time to ask each other questions and to kind of hear from the group. I did not want to, if you were really excited to talk about interventions, at the end of this, we're going to start barely scratching the surface on some components and tools for interventions. But we also wanted to make sure that we showed you some resources that will be timely too as you go forward selecting your assessment screeners for next year. I know a lot of you are kind of feeling like you have to wait right now. So there's some tools to kind of help you to give you an idea of what you currently have is appropriate. So we're gonna kind of, it might feel like it's all over the board a little bit, but know that this time is for y'all. We don't want to kind of keep loading you. We want to stop and, you know, take a look at where you currently are and figure out what you need to kind of move forward. Because moving forward for the rest of the network sessions is really going to be about, okay, we know all these things now. Now, what does it look like? How can we put it into action? So if you received the email, the local literacy plan template that I sent, which in the email that I think some people did not receive, it's also accessible on the Padlet. That can be kind of your guiding notes for today. We're going to talk a lot about the sections of creating a local literacy plan. So you can use that as you hear people share ideas. There's also a professional development plan template. And while both of these forms are not required, they can be great tools to help you monitor moving forward and would be considered best practice. However, if you are a district who is one of the comprehensive literacy grantees, you are required to update your local literacy plan annually while that grant cycle is in place. And so for, I think it's TPS and Lakota, you are the two districts in our region. You have that grant for one more year. So any revisions will need to happen this spring, or unless you indicated differently and determine that with the department. So you do not need to use this, but it might just be a good way to kind of organize your thoughts moving forward. I wanted to make note of a lot of the topics that organizes a local literacy plan, as they will parallel a lot of the topics we'll discuss today. So like I said earlier, section 2 of a plan is alignment between your local literacy plan and other improvement efforts. So making sure that you're not running with your local literacy plan items and that nobody else is really able to support it, right? We want our systems to be able to support the great work that y'all are doing around literacy. And so that intentionality, calling that out and aligning it can be very beneficial. Then identifying our comprehensive needs. What does our data tell us we need to prioritize? Maybe that, you know, what does the legislation tell us that we need to prioritize? Looking at all of those components, using some of the tools that we have already looked over is also an area of this, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more today. So focusing on section 2 and section 3, and then I'm going to jump down, move your attention to section 6. This is an action plan map. And if you look on the template, you'll see that started on page 9. And while you might not be able to specify all the things that you kind of want to do, this is, so let's say that you want to do professional development around structured literacy. So you could write, we want to get 100% of our teachers familiar with structured literacy. And then as we go through various tools and hear from one another of what we've done, or what's worked and hasn't worked, you could kind of start creating a draft of an outline of things that you want to bring to your team possibly to consider. Okay. So if you feel like you want to use it, by all means, please do. So we were going to talk first, making sure that we're all on the same page around some of these school improvement terms that we hear in our systems. But before we do that, I'm going to jump ahead really quickly. And I'm going to bring us to another slide because Katie Remmel is with us, and she currently has 2 children who are, receiving supports and services specific to reading. And she has to leave today at 9:30 to make sure that those boys get on the bus. So we're going to stop right here first. And I just want to hear from her and let you all have an opportunity to ask any questions. She has a son who's been identified with dyslexia, and then another son who has reading supports and possibly in place. So I'm going to give the floor over to Katie, and take it from there.
Hi, I actually was tested positive for the flu yesterday too, so I sound awful. I am so sorry. And the school's running on a 2-hour delay, so I still have to take my kids to school at 9:30, so that's why I have to leave. But what we started noticing is we started with I have identical twin 10-year-old boys who are in the 4th grade. And we started there back in the background. Did you hear them yell me? We started noticing some red flags in preschool with them as they were learning and doing some things. So I became very passionate about learning what I could do. I'm also the Title I teacher at my school. So I was working with a ton of kids who are struggling with reading. And so some things that my kids do really well. One, they both can problem solve like none other. And they do so much work in their head, they just can't always get it out to you. So they're out there playing video games right now, and I have no clue how they know what to do and what buttons to push, but they can do it. But they can't always tell you why. Or math is a strong point for both of them. And my sons both could do percentages of numbers in their head without thinking too much about it. But to ask them, what did you just do? They cannot get those words out to explain and tell us what to do. And verbally, like science and social studies, they can tell me all about every single person. But the minute you put it down on paper and pencil and have them tell you similarities and differences, all of a sudden they can't write it, but they can tell you everything about these people. So it's been frustrating as a parent to know how smart and how dedicated they are to working hard, and them not being able to see the success. So my son last year, my first son, actually got put on an IEP for SLD, and then we went all the way through the neuropsych. Like I went through outside neuropsych to see if it truly was dyslexia with him. And so he has the official diagnosis of dyslexia. And then my second twin just this year, I just had the meeting at the beginning of February. So just 2 weeks ago, his IEP got put into place for SLD for him too. Things that my school district has done, because as a teacher and then a parent watching my kids struggle, my philosophy of education has changed so much because I've learned so much from them. I also have an older daughter who is gifted in ELA and math. So she had no problem going through our cycle that we were doing in elementary. But then when I watched my children when I watched my boys struggle through it, that's when we started having lots of talks. So our district has implemented a phonics program back in. We do Letterly and phonics. I am Orton Gillingham trained, and I am 36 hours into my 60-hour practicum to be an Orton Gillingham specialist. or a certified Orton Gillingham specialist. We work a lot on just working with their phonics. Every night at spelling, we separate spelling sounds for them so that they can hear all those sounds, and we talk about all those rules. And phonics has been such a huge component for them, seeing how to play with those words and doing all of that. And then just the partnership at school, because I have been through it through a parent perspective. The school actually calls me in a lot of the times now to talk to some parents who are a little lenient about looking at this, because they're like, no, they'll get it. And I'm like, but the early intervention, like, I think it would have helped my kids so much more if I would have tried and pushed for things earlier instead of waiting until 3rd and 4th grade. So that's one thing that I really work with right now, is a lot of the parents at our school being like, it's okay, let us see what's going on, let us see how we can improve.
Katie, thank you so much. It's so amazing to have, first in experience, and then also just like what an advocate and great mother you are. I mean, it can be really difficult to go through that process. I feel like for all IEP members, but you know your child the most, and trying to explain that to schools can be difficult. So I don't want to keep you, but do you have a moment to open up for some questions?
Yeah, I do.
Does anybody have any questions for Katie?
Katie, it's Angie Shaw. I have a question for you. You said something about the students not being able, or your children, the frustration of not seeing the progress for them. How does the school team, because you said they're very supportive, how does that connection work for you? Because I see that as a struggle with parents a lot. Like, parents, we may see things differently at home, but those kids cannot transfer it in the classroom, in the school. How do you help, or how do you in the school communicate that?
I am in that same boat, because I would look at them and be like, they can do it. They seriously can do it. You got to push them. They can do it. And they would be like, Katie, they are working their little behinds off and they are not seeing it. So I was that parent who, like I said, I wish I would have listened to the school. Even though I was taking all the classes and doing everything, I wished I would have listened to the school a little bit earlier on how hard my kids were working. And I could see all the red flags, but it was just one of those things that I think, as Jackie said, like, as a parent, you just sometimes don't want to admit it, that it's happening to your kids. And I would sit there and be like, oh, it's a reflection on me. So having the school partnership, like I said, they call me in on a lot of meetings now, and I'm not in there going, hey, I'm here as the title teacher. A lot of times I'm going, hey, I'm here as just a friend who's been through this, and as a parent who's been through it. I teach at the school I graduated from. So I graduated from Eden. We're a small district in Northwest Ohio. So I know most of the parents who have kids, because they either have went through the school or they were there when I was there. So a lot of times we have those connections already formed, that when they pull me in, this is what I had to do with my kids, so it's okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Katie, was there anything like communication wise that as a parent, or that you feel like if on the forefront would have given you an idea that, these are the supports and services we have in place, like as you kind of were coming to terms of, the realities you were facing, what could the district maybe have done differently to let you know, maybe holistically or on an individual level, that how and when supports can be provided?
The hardest part, like I said, is because I'm the title teacher. I was a lot of the supports that my kids were getting at home and then getting at school. Like, they were getting pulled into small groups with me, and my sons really did not respond well to me. Eden has something called a 2-year kindergarten program. So my boys had both went through that 2-year kindergarten program, and both times, progressed slowly. Everything was fine. And then in first grade, it was like the wheels fell off when we really started applying all those skills. And in first grade, we had countless meetings. And I don't know what the school could have done other than, like I said, I just don't think in first grade I was ready to give up on them yet and to say that they couldn't do it. So they actually in first grade did reading recovery, which we did see some growth with them from that, but it still just wasn't enough. And I truly believe that if they didn't have me at home doing all the phonics and breaking everything apart for them, they probably would have been worse. And I probably, as a parent, would have had to admit it sooner, but because of where we were. So I honestly, Jackie, I don't know if the school could have done anything. It's kind of unfortunately, we have to let parents come to it at their own.
Right. Does it change any of your practices with how you communicate with parents now?
Oh, it totally changes my practices. And like I said, because I'm from a small district, like most of the parents know that my boys struggle, and I don't hide it. We have talked about dyslexia with both of my boys. They both know the words. Like I said, my one son last year got put on the IEP and we started talking about dyslexia then. And that's when my second son, the other twin, was like, I do that too. Like, I'm the exact same. So we've tried to make it very positive here. We always talk about their strengths. They're such, like I said, they are both such hard workers. And I sat there going, they can do it. You're just not pushing them. Like, they can do it. And I was that parent going, they count or say their ABCs at home. Why can they not do it at school? And it was just because they were verbally doing it at home with me and then not verbally doing it at school. So there's my practices in my title classroom have changed. How I talk to parents have changed. Like I say, my philosophy fully took a full overhaul on how I approach education right now because of having these two in my life.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. And Katie also sent over all of the reports and all of the assessment information and the IEPs and the RIMPs for her one son. And we're going to spend more time later kind of looking at that and looking at what it looks like in practice and how can we shift and change our services based off of those progress monitoring efforts. So Katie, we're going to let you go, but we're like, thank you so much. Feel better. All right, so major takeaways on that really quickly. As you heard her, did anyone visualize the simple view of reading, right? We have word recognition, language comprehension equals reading comprehension. Where do you think her sons had their strengths? And where do you think that there was possibly weaknesses?
Well, if I heard her right, she was talking about like they had the words in their head and they weren't able to get them out. Did I hear her right saying that?
I think
So,
they verbally could express it, but anytime it went down on paper or
so they have strong oral language component. So it's the decoding part that is that they're struggling with, and that makes sense with what she was saying.
absolutely. And I know, thank you so much, Amy. And she mentioned phonics, but she also said we break down each of those sounds, right? She's constantly practicing those sounds because we know that before phonics, we have to have that strong phonemic awareness to be able to manipulate sounds, then later be able to apply it to our written code. Another takeaway she said was like how helpful it was for parents to be able to have just like a friend at the meeting. So I would ask yourselves as you're moving forward and identifying students and you're notifying families about a possible at-risk condition or a term like dyslexia that's very, prominent in our educational spaces, but also in our family engagement spaces. How are you inviting them to the table? And are you opening the door for them to invite someone with them? Right? I feel like we have a lot of contention feelings sometimes around meetings, and when someone says they're bringing an advocate, we really get nervous, and rightfully so. But what if we offered that invitation at the forefront? How much more comfortable could our parents be coming to the table? And it reminded me of a statewide project, and that's available to all of you. It's Ohio's Parent Mentoring Project. And you can go to the link that I just put in the chat. And every region within Ohio has appointed parent mentors that families can contact. And these parent mentors are family members or parents with students with disabilities who have gone through Ohio's process for identification or renewal. And they can sit alongside the parents and support them, like look over the IEP for them, attend meetings. So this would be a great resource to share, especially maybe when you get into those tier 2, tier 3 family engagement practices where a parent might need additional support. This is completely free. Also, some districts have been appointed their own parent mentor. So if you're unsure if you have a parent mentor, reach out to your curriculum directors or your special ed directors to see if you have one. It's a great service, and they're trained alongside the Ohio Department of Education. So they're going to be equipped with a lot of the knowledge that you will also have. And then the only other thing that I kind of pulled out of that was her note to progress monitoring, right? If we're using a very specified intervention program and it only allocates progress monitoring every 9 weeks or something of that fashion, is that really an effective time to be able to progress monitor? How often are we informally progress monitoring? All the time, right? We're progress monitoring almost every intervention after every intervention we give. So are we documenting that? Is there a way to pull progress monitoring data or have it available that lives outside of perhaps some of those formal instruments that we might use that are embedded in our programs? Just something to leave you with.
Jackie, can I add another comment to that too?
Yes.
This is a little bit different takeaway from that, but as I was listening to her where she was communicating with the school that they can do it, and then she made another comment where she wished she had listened to the district. But I'm also going to flip that is that maybe the district should have also listened closer to her concerns as well. Because we know that with dyslexia, it's an unexpected, how to put it, it's an unexpected problem or issue. Like usually children with dyslexia have very high intelligence. And so even though they're getting good instruction, that they're still not seeing the growth that they should be seeing. And so when she saw that in her children and expressed that to the district, that they can do this, they do know this, I believe her, because they are smart children. They just have to access text. They need that really explicit, systematic instruction with structured literacy to really formulate that word recognition side where they were lacking. So their strengths, what it sounded like, was the language comprehension, but they couldn't write it down because they didn't have the decoding part, which was unexpected based on their intelligence. So it kind of goes both ways. That was a takeaway I took.
Yeah, absolutely, Debbie. Thank you. And the fact that they were doing really well with those basic foundational skills, but once they started taking it to more advanced skills into the first grade is when it started to be more identified. And her one son has been identified, but the other son, he's in 4th grade and he's just now going through the process. So that would have been a really good preventative approach.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts? Carol?
I couldn't agree more with Katie, and I'm very thankful for her sharing all of that information. And a couple things came to my mind is that we do as faculty go into that meeting, we're in a hurry, we need to wrap it up and, on to the next thing. And we just start, saying all these things to our parents with acronyms that we are so comfortable with. And yet the parents they're sitting there, an emotional ball of mess. And I think her sharing the personal side of it is a very much of a comfort, because they feel like that disconnect with that student. They know that they are very intelligent kids, but then you're trying to tell them that they have a learning disability, and it just messes with, their emotions, it messes with their heart. And I can tell you personally, I've sat in hundreds of IEP meetings, but I'll tell you, the day that I sat in that chair as a parent, it was a completely different experience, an emotional experience. And it takes your heart a long time to catch up with what needs to be done. And for my own experience, my son was on a 504. And when one person at the junior high level had said, well, we don't technically have to service your son, we don't have to provide supports, we can find, and it was that moment that I'm like, well, okay, then I have fought this long enough that we apparently need more help than what I expected, because I did see all the things that she had said, the intelligence, and it is a tough go of it. So I appreciate her sharing that. It couldn't have been more perfect. And I think I do the same thing now when I sit in on meetings. I give the parent, let them know that it's so emotional and it is so hard, and let them, react to me that way. And I think it is helpful.
Thank you so much. I see Maria has her hand raised. Thanks for sharing your personal story, Carol. Maria?
So I love the idea of having that parent mentor in there. I know as well from parent experience that, you really, many of our parents, fortunate for us knowing education and being reading people, we know a few more things than the average Joe does, just as a doctor would know, a few more things about health issues. But we have that edge that we can speak a little bit more to it. However, so many of our parents do not have that ability to. They just know something's not right. Something needs to be done. Something's not working out. We know our kids working really hard and they're not making any gains. But they don't always have those words to say, what is it that's going on here, and speak up for their children. And many times it just isn't acknowledged the way they want it to be acknowledged. And my personal experience was unfortunately just absolutely ridiculous with my kids' district, that, I'm like, no, this is not right. Something's not right here. Here's, all the things that are going on. And, when I went to the IEP meeting, they didn't even have her file. Well, we don't know where it's at. I'm like, well, where's her file that has all of these things in it? Well, we don't know. We have a lot of files. We're not quite sure where it's at. I'm like, you should have a file with all of her stuff in it. They didn't have the file. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. And it would be really helpful to have a parent mentor and somebody that a parent can have in with them to speak up and say, hey, this isn't right.
Right.
Or, hey, you should have X, Y, and Z. Where's the progress monitoring? Where's this, that? Because not all the time do everything comes together with the team, that parents would really love to have somebody in their corner being that support for them. So I'm really happy to see that something like that is available.
And I believe, Maria, TPS was appointed one just this year, like this new calendar year.
That's great. That's great. That is great to hear.
And then, to that point, y'all, when we're talking about family engagement, I think especially around literacy, we want to say, let's have a literacy night. Okay, family engagement, talking about and preparing good meetings is a family engagement practice. That is something that you can have professional development around. So we're going to shift away from family engagement right now and move into some other content, but I did want to share with you, I created this alongside some other SST consultants, and it's all about creating good meetings or great meetings for schools and families. And it breaks it down, and there's a facilitator guide that you can walk teams through, so that you can have a process in place for how you support families before a meeting, during a meeting, and after. And you could apply this entire, and it brings a team through those considerations on things that they could, do to support families during that process. So it's full of videos and articles, and it's interactive and can be done, and is intended to be done with a team. And to that point, that could be an action step, right? Family engagement and evidence-based practice in your language and literacy plans. So as we move forward, we're going to first take a quick pause and look at the updates that we have for the dyslexia law. One of the things that you guys had asked was, how many multidisciplinary teams do we need to have? And right now, what we heard from the department is they do not see a ratio being provided. Like, we have X amount of children, we need this amount of teams. But the current understanding, and this was of February 1st, is that each school will need to have a multidisciplinary team. And Melissa asked in the chat, do you know if this is each district or each building within the district? Each building within the district is how they were explaining it. If you are a community school and you act as a district and you are only a building, then you would need one. But if you are Sunbridge and you have 2 locations, you would need 2.
I have a question. Does it make any sense? I'm sorry to interrupt. Should I put my question in the chat? Does it make any sense to have our RTI team be that team? I mean, can that, rather than creating a whole new team?
Right, so you could have, so I would be explicit about that, right? Because we, woman power, manpower is all something that we need to consider. So if you have, like, let's say a building leadership team and they meet once a month, then let's say that team is going to meet an additional half hour a month, hour a month, and they're going to explicitly talk about monitoring their structured literacy approaches and interventions. So yes and no, right? You're probably gonna have to double dip with certain team members based off of your staff. But I would just be very intentional, not like, oh, the BLT just talks about this, also does this, multidisciplinary team. How can you put in structures in place so that, you can show that this time is meant for this content? And someone said elementary ? For what I understand now, it's every single building within a school. So that would include high schools. So those teaming structures at the high school level might look a little bit different. It might be a little bit heavier with some specialists or counselors and things of that nature, as opposed to maybe more classroom level teachers in the earlier elementary grades. So currently, or the committee had been meeting weekly, and there's a few considerations. So they've heard us, and this is what they're kind of mulling over. I'll let you read it. Like, do we need a practicum component for the PD piece? Remember, the PD piece is different than the certification piece. That certification piece does require a practicum component. Talking about ratios again, that ratio between, right now, we need 1 certified individual. Debbie, is it per building or per district?
My understanding at this point is per district.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So they're talking about, based off of the number of children you serve, will there be a ratio? So far, it's looking like there probably will not be. Considerations on additional personnel who should receive this certificate. Right now, it's kind of open-ended. It doesn't even have to be anyone on your staff necessarily who sits as this person on your teams. But they're looking at maybe explaining it a little bit more because, for example, a school psychologist could kind of possibly meet some of the criteria of the certification process because of, you know, the background that they have within their field. Okay, so those things are being discussed. We don't really know which direction it's going to go. There is a new tool that came out in January. It looks like this. It's those specific requirements that live outside of the best practice components that are embedded throughout the guidebook. And it's going to tell you what you need to do each school year. Okay, it's very similar to that spreadsheet that we had provided for y'all for note-taking purposes at the beginning of our sessions, but it will break down what you need to do for the upcoming school year, the following school year, and after moving forward. So this is on the Padlet. It's also linked in the PowerPoint.
I'm also going to piggyback on this. So these are the requirements that the law is mandating. But this goes hand in hand with the guidebook for best practices. So as we're looking at this from a district level, yes, these are the requirements by the letter of the law that must be followed. But we also have that guidance of best practices. And so really as a district, we should be marrying the two together. So it doesn't just become a compliance issue that, okay, check, we did this, check, we did this. Like, are we really making changes in our district that are going to move our children forward? So just keeping in mind that we will have these two documents, but they need to be married together as we're creating plans, so that we're not just checking a box that we did it, that we're actually going about this with great intentionality so that we can really move our children forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Debbie. And to Debbie's point, this can be the evidence that you need for your district level teams and your building level teams to say, like, we need to make sure that this year we provide training for our screeners, especially in these grades, right? And so that way this can help your leadership teams maybe scaffold out what you're going to be doing over the coming years. So this will allow you to identify priorities, and then that guidebook will allow you to identify, here's what needs to be embedded within that for it to be effective. The other thing that we wanted to bring to your attention, there was a request from the International Dyslexia Association, and specifically our branch in Northwest Ohio, that the dyslexia guidebook is under attack from individuals who are advocates for whole language approaches. So essentially, they are not agreeing with what the science says, and they are bringing that to the dyslexia committee. Not telling you that you have to email them. We are by no means saying that you need to, but if you are, you know, adamant and believe in the structured literacy approach, then you may email your state board representatives and let them know that you support structured literacy practices. But that is 100% your choice. Mark it, it's recorded. I am not telling you what to do. Okay, so where we left off, in our reflection email, after our last session, we asked ourselves, what can we start doing now as it relates to meeting those legislation requirements and embedding them into our school improvement efforts? So we left you with some questions to consider. And this is where we kind of wanted to open up the floor to you. What are you doing? What is a possible barrier? where, you know, where are you? Are you updating current plans? Feel free to unmute and share out.
So Jackie, in our district, we are forming a committee of teachers. I have about 30 that have volunteered for it. And we are going to create our district plan to implement all of these things. You know, including the dates that they need to be done and all of those things. So we've already done a lot of the things that the dyslexia law requires, including we have tier 1 instruction happening at K1 and 3 or K through 3. And we have our screener, but we need to look at the training that needs to happen over the next couple of years for our teachers. We also need to think about the tier 2 assessment that's going to be required. So there is lots to do. I feel like we're in a pretty good place. But I definitely want it to be this large committee because I need buy-in from everybody. Because there's a lot of moving parts in this.
Thank you, Angie. Have you seen any barriers based off of any of this or anything that you've had to like maybe misconceptions or anything in that regard?
You know, we have kind of started this process about 3 years ago when I got here, just because of some of the background that I have, and that's when we implemented our tier 1 instruction. And we've seen results from that, like in our testing. So we are, you know, we're showing growth even in the pandemic in our 3rd grade score particularly. So I think that I have a lot of, you know, the buy-in is there in that way. But my bigger concern is once we get to, you know, above elementary and training and just really connecting that for our secondary teachers, because this is not something that they have typically had to think about or kind of deal with because they're so content specific. So I really want to make sure that we can bring them along and know and help them understand what their role is in all of this, and really support their knowledge base so that they can do that. But I guess the other thing is, Jackie, like having over 30 people that want to be part of this committee, I think speaks really nicely about where the mindset is in the teachers that are here. So I think they will do great things.
Thank you, Angie. Does anybody have any questions for Angie related to what she's already done, related to anything moving forward, or anything else to piggyback on? Anybody else want to share anything that you're currently prioritizing that you've seen work well, that you would say, hey, I would not do this from my perspective? Anything to share?
Jackie, I have a question for the group. It's Angie again, sorry.
Thank you.
Has anyone seen any other science of reading professional development besides letters and the Big Dippers? Is there anything else I need to be looking at? Those are the two we have kind of looked at in our district.
Say that again, Angie.
I'm just wondering if anyone has other professional development recommendations for the science of reading. We've looked at letters and Big Dippers. Our reading teachers right now are going through letters, but I'm not sure we're going to go that route for the whole staff yet. Just wondering what options people are looking at.
Kimberly put in the
Well, I
chat-
am in the letters training with Michelle Alaya. We're in a cohort going through that right now. She mentioned yesterday one that does fit called Keys to Literacy. If you do the beginning reading section, I don't know anything about it, but she mentioned it yesterday. And she's a letters trainer and involved in the dyslexia committee at the state of Ohio.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Keys to literacy, and I want to make note that we'll also follow up and make sure that all of the things that we share are added to the Padlet. I also put in the chat the Reading League. They have an online academy that's available, and they also have a mission and a call for embedding science of reading, and that can maybe support kind of any mission or statement that you have as you move forward. Anybody else?
So I guess I'm just wondering, are most people going outside of what the state's going to offer, or are you training a cohort of people deeper in letters? I mean, if you're going to take letters, it takes going to take longer than, it's a lot of time. I'll just say that, going through it. So, I mean, I don't know, are most districts that just going to do the 18-hour modules because that seems a little more manageable, or are people looking for outside sources?
Stephanie, I am in the same boat as you. I'm wondering about that. And I am letters trained. And so I'm struggling. I also went through that Big Dippers, which is a 10-hour. But for me, that really didn't give enough for the teachers to really truly understand why they're doing what they're doing. So then I revert back to letters because I think it does such an amazing job of really connecting the teachers to the instruction and why we're doing it, and gives them the vocabulary and the knowledge. And I have faith that whatever the state develops will be great. I'm really worried that the state is waiting so long to release it. I mean, we should have it now so that we can start looking at it, because we've got to basically train our K-1 teachers next year. I mean, we're not going to be able to wait. And, PD plans are being developed now for next year. So unfortunately, I wish that they would get on the ball and get that released a lot sooner. But I know that there's a whole process there. So Stephanie, I feel your pain. I'm in the same place.
Thank you. Misery loves company.
I feel like when Michelle talked about it yesterday, she also said that she feels confident that what the State Department puts out will be quality and will be good, but she wonders about the depth of it. And that sounds like what you experienced with Big Dippers too.
And I would question too, like, so when you're thinking about who needs to go in the most depth, so let's say, you considering letters, maybe you have your literacy coaches from your various academies, they are the ones that do the letters. They're the ones that are going to sustain whatever PD and maybe embed instructional coaching alongside it, provide, supports for the multidisciplinary team or the teacher teams. These are all things that you could consider, and then because letters is very robust. The keys to literacy that Stephanie mentioned, that is basically the smaller version of letters. They have a lot, and they provide a lot of great one-pagers and easy to access tools that can support a teacher team, for example, and really looking at the scope and sequence of how to teach phonemes, for example, or the scope and sequence of phonics development. There's a lot of supports there, and that that are very teacher friendly. Any other questions or thoughts? Christy?
Jerry, this is I have also done letter training and I'm coaching teachers through it in Swanton. And one of the things about letters is that each unit is worth 12 hours. So I'm thinking that once you get through the first 2 units of letters, those 9 that are required would be taken care of. And then beyond that is
Christy, I'm sorry. We can not really hear what you're saying.
Okay, type it in the.
I think I heard her talking about the components of letters and how you can take it as big or as little as you can, and that maybe she'll something chat. So I'm assuming she's gonna put it in the chat. Sorry, Christy. I know she always has great things to share. Anybody else? Okay, so we're going to, can you still see my screen? You're seeing the two logos? Thumbs up, okay. All right, so kind of got the ball rolling on some ideas. Okay, we might want to be focusing our attention on professional development, but we also want to, if you're provided the opportunity, really considering aligning your efforts. A lot of the work that we're doing right now for literacy cannot be held on the shoulders of one person. It cannot be held on the shoulders of one curriculum director, even one, literacy coach. So what systems do you have available to you to support this work? You have the backing of legislation, right? So that's going to give you like the why that you have to do it. But we all know that there's also that collective why is because it's best practice. So we know that many of our schools follow the school improvement structure, right? A lot of our schools have and our districts have school improvement plans. We might have local literacy plans, and we have professional development plans that are being developed this year. So what can you jump onto for that sustainability? You might have the ability to, provide everyone with some great training. Sorry, I just got a direct message. Everyone is breaking up. Can you hear me clearly? Thumbs up.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. So what can you do? How can you rely on your system, right? So when you're talking about implementing these components, and what infrastructures do you have in place? And then knowing that this multidisciplinary literacy team should parallel and be a part of that feedback loop that you have in place for those existing structures. So when we look at our 5-step process for overall school improvement, that supporting implementation, that center component is all about, do we have the structures in place? Do we know what our teams are doing? Do we have times to meet? Do we have a consistent schedule in place? Those are the components that if you develop them now preventatively, they're going to help you when you get to determining professional development, selecting screeners, right? That you have a system in place for it, in place for it. And it's not just Debbie running around being like, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. And it feels like you have to constantly put out fires. So what are those existing structures? Many of your schools right now are going through your school improvement process. Quick show in the chat. Give me a yes if you are a part of your district or building leadership plans in school improvement plan development and monitoring, and give me a no if that's not in your sphere of influence. Wonderful. Okay, thank you. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with terms for how it relates to school improvement. So let me come here. So quick eyeball of this. If I say the words one needs assessment, one plan, funding to the CCIP, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10, I completely know that jargon, or 1, I'm not sure what you're talking about at all, because I want to see if it's worthy of spending some time with it. Wonderful. Okay, I see a lot of 10s. Okay, so then we'll go over this quickly. If you're unfamiliar with some of these terms, I've broken them down in a chart here for you. Okay, so right now, if your school has, I'm going to skip ahead to this. Okay, right now we are rolling out a new process for school improvement efforts. We're switching from an old dashboard across the state from that CCIP, the continuous improvement plan, to one plan, which is a 3-year cycled plan. Okay, so every year we used to have to write a plan every single year. Now we're doing it on 3-year cycles. To make sure that districts are supported during that, they've broken people up into cohorts, districts. We had pilot districts who are just now ending their first 3-year cycle. We have a cohort 1, which is all of y'all listed here, who have one more year of their 3-year cycle. We have a cohort 2 that's starting this year on their one plan 3-year cycle. And then we have a cohort 3. These are the folks that are still doing that 1-year plan this year. And starting next year, they'll start their 3-year plan. Okay. Every school, so the verbiage that we're going to use moving forward, every school needs to complete or every school and district needs to complete the one needs assessment. This was previously known as the decision framework. This is a tool that supports you in determining what you need to do moving forward to create and prioritize what your plan will be for the year. Okay, then from once your plan is developed, it pushes your funding. Okay, and so like it's kind of a flip. Before we had funding and we allocated a plan to it. Now we're saying, let's have a plan. Now let's push in funding. Okay, so that's kind of the flip that's taking place. So while some of you may not be doing a needs assessment now, you might be revising your local literacy plans, maybe a reading achievement plans that are living on a 1-year cycle. Okay, so based off of where you are in your cohort, and based off if you have a local literacy plan, how can you align those timelines? Because right now, systems and structures, you might have one person really in charge of updating that local literacy plan. If that local literacy plan can now get aligned to where your 3-year cycle is, you can have those teams and structures to support you in revising and monitoring that plan over the course of your identified plan cycles for your overall district improvement plans. This is the timeline that just explains further where the cohorts are. So for those of you that are in cohort 2, right now is prime opportunity. That ONA, that one needs assessment is open right now. And your districts and schools are going to have to complete it by March 31st, alongside the completion of a one plan, right? And so this is perfect time for you to, if you have a local literacy plan or you're doing something on a local literacy plan that not really everyone else knows about, perfect time to align those two. And I think Diana with Sunbridge is right in this boat right now. So Diana, would you mind sharing with the group kind of what you're seeing is effective for helping align your efforts, what you're kind of going through, and what you're, any thoughts you have to share? Looks like she's up with Jenny. And you guys got it.
Sorry, we're just starting this effort. So, and I'm in a unique position since we're just we are a small school and we are the district. And so I'm able to, I literally pulled out all of our plans, our reading achievement plan, our OIP, the local literacy plan. And as I'm completing the one needs assessment, the one, I'm kind of trying to look at what are the key factors that I want to pull into the other plans. For me, since we are a title school and we are a high needs school, we have a lot of plans to do. So my goal is to kind of align them all as closely as possible. So as I'm completing the one needs, I'm also kind of backfilling and looking at our other plans to see how we can get them so that way we only have 1 or 2 matrices that we have to report out on, but that are the most important, meaningful ones that we can look at. Does that make sense? And that's all where I'm at right now. It's a slow process.
Anybody have any questions for Diana or anything to share? So Diana, what do you foresee being, what makes it, if you're aligning these efforts, what makes the local literacy plan then different or needed in conjunction with your overall one plan for the district?
I think for me, when then doing the local literacy plan, I think that helps us kind of dive down deeper into like the steps that we're going to take. So the one needs I kind of see as my big bucket that I'm working on. And then when I'm pulling in my literacy plan, we're looking at
kind of smaller action steps that we can do as a team. So great feedback. Thoughts? Are our wheels spinning? Is this helpful? Do we want to sit here a little bit?
So I know Debbie's out there. This is Stephanie. So we've had some conversation about getting started on writing a local literacy plan. And I know that Lynn has kind of shared some additional thoughts that we had since our last meeting. So I don't want to get into too deep our specifics, but I think where we're coming from too is that whole notion of how she just framed that. Like if we do the one needs assessment, that's the overarching needs of the district that's driving, your OIP and your plan for the district. But a portion of that is going to be literacy. To me, writing the local literacy plan before you write the one needs assessment doesn't make sense because you're doing the work twice, right? So if you do the one needs assessment, that's comprehensive of your needs of your district, and then you pull out the literacy needs to then do the local literacy plan. But
Saying start with the one plan
part before the
first.
horse, chicken or egg. I don't know. But what I don't want to happen is two plans that people are trying to, like you're talking about, like people are trying to monitor, this group's monitoring this plan, this group's monitoring that plan, that some of them overlap. It just seems like we should streamline it by starting with the one needs assessment and the one plan.
Right, and I think that makes a ton of sense, and especially with y'all are in cohort 2, correct?
We're actually cohort 3, but I think we're 3. Yeah, but we're ready to rock and we want to start.
Oh, great. Heidi, you asked why not all districts are on the list. I have the list is here. If I went from one of the sign-ins that we had at some point, so I just pulled from what was there. You can find your district on this list here. And I think, Stephanie, I think you make a great point, but and if you're in that space where your school, your district's not going to do your one plan, but you're looking at needing to revise a local literacy plan now, then I think it would be something for the team to consider as it relates to an action step. How can we be systematic with our literacy efforts so that we can monitor it more effectively across the district, right? So like an action plan could be literacy school improvement, right? Where we're going to define, create structures for providing feedback loops. We're going to really work on supporting that implementation. The district leadership team will know who to come to so that those structures are in place so that when you get to that next year, when you start your one plan 3-year cycle again, you've done that preventative work so that this isn't new, but then that you're not sitting there having to wait for your new cycle for school improvement to start, right? You can, how can the local literacy plan kind of leverage this? And then I think it would also be great to say, what's in our one plan now? And are we even monitoring that through the local literacy plan? Or is the monitoring that's working in the, one plan, our district whole-wide plan or building plan, is that effective enough for monitoring so that we don't really need to spend our energies there in our local literacy plan? We can be more explicit, maybe focus on a different grade band, etc., so that both people aren't doing the same thing. One of the glory of alignment is the idea that we're not all in different groups around the district collecting the same data, doing the same legwork. If we can have specific teams do it and then create an infrastructure to support those teams, we won't all be running a mile a minute doing some of the exact same activities for school improvement. Any other thoughts at this time? Okay, so something to consider. Ohio's theory of action. There's 5 components to increase language and literacy proficiency per Ohio's analysis of research from the field. So if I'm creating a local literacy plan, whether it be a 1-year plan or a 3-year plan, all of these components are considerations to support those efforts. So if you're thinking about an overall arching evidence-based practice for one of your performance goals, what does that look like for family partnerships? What does that look like for educator capacity? Maybe for educator capacity, you could break that into, 2 buckets. We have leadership capacity and we have teacher capacity. And if we have a 3-year plan, year 1, we're focusing on leadership capacity and building infrastructures for train the trainer and ongoing stability. Year 2, we're doing X, Y, or Z. So if you follow these 5 tenets as your base for your evidence-based areas, you're going to constantly be bringing yourself back to effective research and what best practice says. Also, the caveat being each of these components are identified and discussed in the dyslexia guide. So if you are looking at a blank local literacy plan on page 9, at the top where it says evidence-based practice, we need collaboration, evidence-based practice, family partnerships, then evidence-based practice, right? And then you can be explicit on how you're going to break that down and then measure its impact. Where are we kind of leading? If you're developing a local literacy plan, what do you think is going to be more effective? A 3-year plan that you kind of monitor along the way, or a 1-year plan that you revise along the way? What makes more sense to all of y'all? I got 2 3s. If we're thinking about a 3-year plan and we want to measure our growth, but we also want to be able to progress monitor throughout, what would those, how do you break apart what those goals, those performance goals might look like? Do you break it down by year? Another shift I just want to note here is we have learner performance goals that we often use, and as what we're all probably familiar with when we're creating SMART goals for our plans. But we can also have adult implementation goals, right? So if we have this educator capacity and we know it's going to take 3 years to implement and train whatever our PD structures are, and let's not even say it's going to take 3 years to basically train all teachers, let's just say. And then the next 3-year cycle, we're really going to focus on coaching, right? Around literacy and monitoring what we've taught, et cetera. Or maybe we break it into cohorts. I feel like we are automatically as educators tied to saying, I'm going to train all my teachers. That means that 90% of my students are going to increase in, X subskill. That correlation, I think, will happen over time, but a learner performance goal is secondary to the intended goal of, reaching that capacity. So how can you measure educator capacity first, right? We can say they attended these trainings. Next, capacity means that they're able to sustain it, use it appropriately. Okay, then we might have walkthroughs, right? We might have their annual observations, okay? There's a lot of ways that we can measure that will eventually lead us to an overall improvement in student progress. But like to Katie's point of saying the progress was so slow, and we kept like being worried. It can be really, you put all this effort into creating a local literacy plan, and your measure for success is, student impact, of course. That's what we're all striving for. But you might have a goal that's maybe, more immediate towards achieving, right? Because it's oftentimes I remember making SMART goals for student performance and being like, I have no idea how to increase this. I have no idea, if this will actually happen, and it makes it very hard to monitor, right? In correlation with other efforts that might live outside of those explicit instructional opportunities. So just something to consider. Okay, so as you're coming to the table, I'm gonna open the floor up again, y'all. What data are you bringing to these school improvement meetings? What's been helpful for you? What's resonated with people that live outside of the sphere of literacy? Those O&A questions, some of them are very specific to literacy. What data outside of that student performance data do you have available? I want to caveat to the family engagement literacy tools that we put on the Padlet from last time, that RTFI. Remember, that was what your systems look like across all tiers. Lead for Literacy is a framework that's very similar to the RTFI that we're going to link in the Padlet for something to do as a data source, or walkthrough data. What data are you collecting and analyzing outside of student performance data, or what, if you're not, would you like to? Or maybe, we're butting heads here and you're like, I don't think that that's effective to bring that data. Let's talk it out. Let's dish it out. Stephanie's going to have her team completing the RTFI this summer. And then will you use that data? Yeah, please, Stephanie.
Yeah, one of the things that we, I guess, recently had some ahas on, and as we look at our adult implementation measures within our plan, they're there, like 100% of teachers will implement, research-based literacy strategies with fidelity as measured by classroom walkthroughs. Well, they might be looking for those in classroom walkthroughs, but we don't have anything to like collect. Are we doing a tally? Are we, out of 5 walkthroughs, I saw it 4 times, and that's kind of like it caught you doing it well or whatever. Like there's no formal quantifiable data on it's more like a gut feeling and report out, but there's no way to say numerically, quantifiably, how close are we to 100% of our people doing that? So we're hoping that by doing the RTFI, which is not why we started to think why we're doing that wasn't the impetus for us doing the RTFI alone, but we're hoping then there we'll have a quantifiable measure that our goal could be written a little bit differently in that we would go from 0 to a 2 on whatever element of the RTFI, right?
Wonderful. So use that as a measuring component to show growth and to identify individual needs. I love that. Right. And I think it's hard, like when we're talking about instructional coaching, how do you measure that? And how do you, one of the biggest components that actually we just did a session about this at Plain Talk is the most important part of instructional coaching is leading to change in practices. And the only way that we'll be able to know if we're changing those practices is if we have an explicit structure and process for observations, right? So maybe we can't even have observations yet because we don't have a school-wide schedule, right? So we need to start there. And then we can come in and do walkthroughs or model lessons, and then use the post-assessment discussions or the pre-assessment discussions to measure if what we intended to do occurred, and, you know, have actionable next steps for our teachers, right? Oftentimes we just go in and we do this light coaching. Hey, you did great, you did great. Consider relying more on your instructional routines. And it's just kind of like big, wide brushstrokes, right? So if a coaching system perhaps is something that might be missing, breaking those pieces down can help reach those goals. And I think Christy put a question in the chat. How can we use Lead for Literacy and RTFI, or when we use Lead for Literacy and RTFI, how do we narrow down our action steps? So let's say you have in the RTFI identified, like let's say it says, your school has a way of, or a team that progress monitors student reading in Tier 1. Okay, so then what are the evidence-based practices of what a team needs to be? And what are the evidence-based practices of progress monitoring? So then you're going to go over to that next column, and it means that you need to have all of these things in place. So first, you need to have a discussion with your teams, Christy. Well, if we rated this a 1, what truly is missing? And do we have evidence for it? And if we don't, what can we put in place for to be sustained in our system to have evidence and progress of this moving forward? So then I think it would, you know, once you identify that, Christy, so let's say like, well, we have these teams, but, you know, nobody really knows their role on these teams. And then we end up meeting and we just end up talking about, you know, the upcoming open house, and we never really get to talk about literacy stuff. Okay, well then, what infrastructures can you have to support that? Maybe you're gonna focus this year on developing norms that every single meeting, people are going to bring relevant data to the table specific to our next steps in our literacy plan. All topics are going to align to this. Agenda topics cannot cover X, Y, or Z. And, you know, that's something that is a decision that you make to put into your local literacy plan. We're going to work on, you know, supporting implementation, etc. So Christy, I guess the answer, it would have to be like, you have to decide as a team, kind of narrow it down, and then go back to what does best practice say? Then usually there's some, you know, some process or tool that you can utilize to then develop maybe a missing component or make an easy switch, maybe oftentimes to make it more effective, whatever it might be. I feel like that was a very nebulous example, but also those are the things that we can bring to this group, this network, right? We rated this. Guys, can we walk through and talk about what we could do to improve in X identified need? Jane, what about aligning teacher professional growth plans to this? Absolutely. Debbie's going to say I sound like a broken record when I say this, but you know what I think is the most underutilized team and structure in a lot of our schools is that, Debbie, do you know the answer? I think she's having connection issues because her camera's off. Your LPDCs, right? We have these entire structures in place that we're supposed to have these approvals to make sure that the teachers are getting growth and creating plans that are aligned to our overall district, overall school efforts, right? We can leverage those systems and structures so that, once again, going back to what systems and structures do we have in place to support this work, to make sure that, you know, we're not spending money willy-nilly on, you know, X teacher wants to do PD on this, X teacher wants to do PD on this, et cetera, et cetera. We can really fine tune where we're spending our funds and what professional development is being provided if we leverage those structures that might be seen for quite some time as like a compliance, right? Like, I mean, you know, thinking about it now, I would just give a form and the guy would just sign it, and then I would just move on, you know, as a teacher. Diana, did you want to share? Jane, did you want to elaborate? I think the LPDC would bring us down to maybe those future growth plans and the OTES process, et cetera. But do you want to elaborate? Y'all are quiet today. It makes me nervous feeling. Oh, would you look at that? The next slide is share out and questions.
Jackie, I think we're all just over processing the amount of work this is going to be at a district level. I mean, you know, there are restrictions on us with the number of days we have for professional development or meeting times. And this is a lot of work, even for 3 years, even with 3-year implementation, just with the realities of everything else you're required to do in a district. So I think it's awesome work and I'm really excited to do it. But we're probably all just sitting here going, how are we going to do it all?
Right, absolutely. And would you say that there might be a disconnect on maybe, you know, your higher district level individuals that might be sitting on your teams or even your central office folks that like this literacy stuff came so quick and so fast that they're like, why would we prioritize that? You know, we kind of know what we want to do moving forward. Is anybody seeing that?
No, not here. That's not an issue for us. It's just,
Great.
it's just all the other things that we're also required to do.
Jackie.
Oh, go ahead, Carol. And
I
then
was just going to add that, and maybe I'm shouldn't speak on this, but I feel like our district is definitely trying to move forward, and we have our eyes on some products that we want to consider. We also want to go to trainings for the professional development, but I know our district also doesn't have the money to go down one path and then all of a sudden to decide, find out that those products that we're wanting are not going to be on the approved list. And then we're going to have to pivot. We don't have that kind of disposable income. So, I mean, I feel like that's probably like a roadblock for us for moving forward. I know we have several things that we're looking at, but I think we want to feel confident that what we spend our money on is going to be in the approved, on the approved vendor list.
are you talking specifically about assessments?
New phonics programs. We went to some trainings, had some professional development this year. They're considering like a week-long professional development before school starts. But I think before we actually commit to those things, they need to be on the approved list. And I think that would, you know, using those products and using those companies, I mean, I think that's going to impact how we write up our, you know, all of our plans.
Okay. Yeah, that's very, very valid point. I think you're hearing a lot of the same thing in the chat, Carol. Let's hear, Maria, you have your hand up.
Yeah, you know, Megan typed in for us, and I think everybody is absolutely typing the same thing or thinking the same thing, that, you know, OD is going to offer training. So you're going to have, you know, teachers that are going to need to be trained. And then our district is getting ready to make a new textbook adoption. So we're going to have professional development that has to be done for the textbook. We'd love to see this vendor list that, you know, they're just, it's not ready yet. The training. So it's hard to really say we know what needs to be done, but we're waiting on what's approved because as Megan said, you know, we cannot jump too quickly because all of this PD is going to have to be first and foremost for you know 41 elementary buildings that we have, and that's going to be so overwhelming for our staff that you know we're just really going to have to sit tight until you know we got you know we want to choose the right textbooks, we want to choose, you know, we don't have unlimited funds to get all of this together, but it's definitely going to be so overwhelming for our colleagues that they're going to need this training, they're going to need PD in our textbooks. We have to choose the right textbooks that will be aligned correctly with this. So I think it's just really hard to do one step forward, kind of hang in status quo until we can see, you know, what needs to be done for, you know, for PD at all before we can move on.
Absolutely. Those are very good points. And I think, has anybody done like an audit or anything of like, so to Maria's point, like what professional development do we need, but how do we know what our teachers currently have? Has anybody done anything like that to gauge?
My concern with auditing what we already have is a lot of teachers recently received like their reading specialization, and the instruction that they were provided in there is not aligned with what we're being told is not a structured literacy. And so looking at what they already have, I'm unsure as to whether or not that would even align with the PD that we need for them.
Right, so you're saying like, oh yeah, I'll report that I have this reading support, right? So if we're doing an audit like that, how can we gauge what teachers know as it relates to the science of reading? So would it be helpful to have like a tool that broke down those components? And like, so for example, you know, the list of all the components for aligned to like the reading rope, and then maybe what certification or whatever is embedded in that. That could be something maybe. I'm gonna work on trying to get something like that together. That would, you know.
Jackie, with TPS, you know, we've already been a part of Striving Readers Grant, and now we're part of the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant. We know we have good PD embedded. I mean, even when ODE came up, they were very impressed with the PD that we were offering our teachers, but it's still, all of this hinges on these vendors and what's going to be approved, because we can offer, we know it's based on the science of reading, but if they're not saying that's the way you need to go, it really is a moot point.
Right, absolutely. So he approved for the training. My mind is kind of pulling back to that 3-pager that we shared at the beginning, because that professional development, according to the legislation, is going to begin in that 2023 school year, right? So we have the list of professional development courses. But if I think too, just to distinguish between the two, because we keep saying approval list, right? But then it's that screening, that universal screening approval list too, right? And so they kind of are two different buckets. So I want to point y'all's attention to this tool. So as we were talking about just now, like how can we professionally develop, like how can we provide an audit for our teachers to kind of gauge what they already currently have, and just to maybe, you know, have that information to move forward as we select, you know, what we're going to utilize for PD. This tool that I'm going to show you can help you do that same thing, but look at your assessment. Okay. So I'm gonna put this in the chat. Someone give me an assessment name for reading and a grade level you use it in.
Like Renaissance CBM.
We'll see if that's in here. I don't know if that is formal enough, but we'll see. So what this tool is going to do is it allows you to see the reliability of the assessment tool, the validity of the assessment tool, and if a bias analysis was conducted, if there's bias in the tool. You also can see what it measures as it relates to growth standards. And these different very, I guess like mumbo jumbo, some of them are very research heavy words, like reliability of it, the validity of it. But I think this is really important here at the bottom or on the far end. Does this assessment tool have decision rules that can help us? Because a lot of us are talking about making decision rules and things of that nature. And then does it have decision rules that not only tell us what path to follow for assessments, like next steps for figuring out our diagnostics, but also does this assessment tool have it to tell us, hey, here's where we landed with our diagnostics, here's some suggestions for interventions or instructional support. Okay, so it's going to tell you that if that's available. And then it's going to go into the usability of that tool. So how do you have to administer it? Some of you are going to have to make decisions about what assessment you use based off of its effectiveness on, are there any, administration guidelines where only X type of, trained individual can provide this assessment? How long does it take to assess, right? We don't want something that's just going to be bogged down and take up a lot of our time. And then what scoring formats are available for it? And then how often can you utilize it? So is it at the beginning of the year, end of the year, middle of the year? And then, so let's look at a specific one. Which you can also do this on your own. Because this list is here, here's Acadience. So Acadience, sorry, Carol, I know that you said that, but I couldn't find the little search thing. So for the sake of time. So this is going to look at the Acadience, but then this is the area of the assessment, okay, the maze. And then, so you'll see all of the Acadience assessments for K through 6, and then that subscale. So you can look as it relates to each component of the big 5, right? The different area and the different grade band. And then those requirements. So I'm just going to click on this one. Acadience, ORF, or oral reading fluency. Then if you collapse all of this information, you're going to see all the details that you're going to need to probably have for your central office staff, and they're going to ask you the questions, well, how much does it cost? How do we access it, etc. So if you have like those small implementation teams that are looking at a variety of vendors for assessments, breaking this down, knowing what training that they provide for it, and then any administration specifics. Not everyone needs to know all these details, right? But the people, the district overall, before they select this, are going to need to consider these things. So this is the overall summary. But then all of those components that were in that chart that we just looked at, you can also access here. Give me a thumbs up if you want to independently navigate this for a minute. Whether with an emoji or with your cameras on. All right. Why don't we give you like 7 minutes just to play with this, get comfortable with some of the terms, okay? So we can all turn off our videos and explore for the next 7 minutes. Someone's gonna have to share out. Heidi, will you be on deck? Thank you, thank you. All right, kind of wrap up where you're at. Okay. Coming back together, are we good, y'all? Moment. Heidi, what are you thinking?
It gives a lot of information, especially once you start, like, if you click on an actual assessment and go to their page that describes it, it kind of tells exactly what is being assessed. And I was looking at iReady and it definitely gave like an overview of like each area and like phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, vocabulary. It even breaks down comprehension into literal, or I'm sorry, informational text and narrative text, which I think is important too, because students may understand narratives but struggle with informational. So there was a lot of information.
Right. And I think assessments in general can be so intimidating, and with all of that information, oftentimes we don't even understand, quite to no fault of our own, what the tools that we currently have are even capable of. Right. So Kimberly put in the chat a tool. You see it up here on my screen. The different tiers are in different colors. If you were, and it's broken down per these components of the big five, including writing, which I love. And she has it for curriculum and for assessment. She had, Kimberly, do you mind unmuting and sharing where you received this from, and then ways that you think it's been useful to use?
Sure. So earlier this fall, Stephanie Bradley, she works for Edison Local Schools. I believe she's their Director of Student Services. She wanted to get people in our region. So I'm with North Point ESC. So we're more around the Sandusky area. And she wanted to get districts together and really talk about what are we using for the different tiers in terms of assessments and curriculum. And this all obviously is a part of science of reading and preparing for dyslexia. So she just reached out to districts and said, if you're interested, come to this meeting. And this was one of the first things that we did, is just kind of put together what we have in our own district. So it is sort of a self-audit. And then we get together, we've been getting together about monthly, and we just meet at Edison High School and we just talk about what we're using, and people are sharing what they're using and how they use it. And it's just been super informational, and that's a great way to track. We're learning a lot. We are very much like other districts where we're trying to decide what we want to do so that we are meeting the needs of our students, especially with the dyslexia law right around the corner. We're looking at phonics programs, we're looking at assessments as well. And so it's just been a really good tool to learn about a lot of different things out there that maybe we didn't know about, and we want to start considering.
Thank you. Do you have like a specific example of like one of the takeaways or things that you?
Sure. There are a couple of districts that are coming that are also a part of some of these literacy grants. So they've had a lot of money to throw at a lot of different programs. So like 95% group I'll bring up is something that was kind of new to us. And so we're learning a lot about 95% group. It's a tier 1 phonics, but a lot of districts in our area, not a lot, a handful, I should say, are using them at intervention and having great success. So at our last meeting, or one of our last meetings, we had a district using it, presenting about it. So, I mean, that was a great takeaway. So now we're looking at that as possible considerations.
Wonderful. I love that. How do we all join it?
I could give your name to Stephanie. She's kind of just been the organizer of it. And then I couldn't even tell you how many districts are involved right now, but it's just been a great learning opportunity.
That's wonderful. I love that. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Kimberly or any thoughts as it pertains to utilizing this versus maybe also the chart that we just looked at, the assessment chart? All right. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, and I kind of was a little concerned that we wouldn't be able to really dive into the intervention piece, but I just feel like all of this discussion is very timely right now as it relates to where you guys are in your school improvement efforts. So I just wanted to, you know, make sure that we discussed it before we really moved on. So wait, Maria has her hand up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for everybody. As I mentioned before, we are getting ready to adopt a new curriculum for next fall. I just wondered if anybody has adopted one recently, has looked at anything, or is there anything that anybody is using that they really, really, really like? Okay, that silence tells me everything. It's like, you know, we're trying to find something so we're not piecing, you know, we don't want to buy an extra phonics program. We don't want to buy a blah, 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 just something that's really comprehensive that anybody has, you know, adapted recently that said, wow, this is just, we really love this new series. It really hits everything, you know, and structured literacy really well. Okay, Christy said CKLA, which I do not know what that is.
Maria, I can tell you from that collaborative group that I meet with, that Amplify CKLA does come up, and also Open Court, which is like an oldie, I guess, but goodie from McGraw-Hill. McGraw-Hill also has a new Wonders, I think Wonders 2023, that is supposed to have off pieces and parts, but what my group has found is that there isn't one. They're still like, even if they use Open Court, they're using Haggerty. So it seems like, especially for those younger K2, to find one program that does it all, I don't know if that magic bullet's out there.
It is not.
But Open Court and the Amplify CKLA, we are hearing very good things about.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That is most helpful. So just something that we should be looking at. I'm just getting so tired of us. I mean, we have Haggerty too, and that's great. Just looking for something that, you know, just getting tired of piecing, you know, oh, this is good, but it's not really, you know, doesn't really encompass the good phonics part. It doesn't really do well with PA. Really great reading. Okay, I've heard of that one, Jane. Thank you. Really great reading. Okay, thanks.
And I think, unfortunately, Maria, a lot of these vendor assessments have just aligned to a broad Common Core, you know, standards. So the breadth at which they kind of maybe go into different components might be there in some, and for some standards and not others. So the piecemeal component for sure is a frustration. And I think that was something we struggled with when we sat down with Swanton to do their curriculum evaluation. You know, we were looking at like 3 different curriculums at once, and we like had to stop ourselves and be like, okay, let's go through one, see what we like about it, and then bring in all of these different pieces, because it is so much and there is supplementing that needs to occur. And it's going to look different based off of the needs of your teachers and the needs of your learners. So it's a hard process, most definitely, to go through.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your input.
I also feel that being cautious and being a critical consumer is going to be really important going forward, because as the science of reading has kind of become a buzzword in the last year and a half or so, and that word is really getting out, which we're excited about. But the response that I predict is going to happen is that as curriculum developers and companies will put a new cover with a sticker on it that say that their curriculums are aligned to the science of reading, and they may not be, but they're going to be trying to sell their wares. And so we're going to need to be very careful in being critical consumers and knowing what we're looking for. And also knowing that there's no perfect curriculum. This is where that underlying knowledge that this whole point of this dyslexia legislation is on prevention, that as teachers have that underlying knowledge, that they're going to know where the gap is in the curriculum and they're going to know what to do. So that's the hope and the goal of this professional development going forward.
Well, I agree. That was the problem when we started out with, the Common Core, is that, our district just jumped right up and went out and bought something, and, really it was kind of garbage. And, they just slapped a sticker on it. And we really want to avoid that this time with the science of reading, in just saying, oh, look, they slapped that sticker on it, because, we're just really good about, oh, look, it's shiny, it's pretty, and it's got the right stickers on it. And look what we've got now. And then, I've got 2,500 teachers screaming at us because it really doesn't have the components in it. So I just wondered if anybody was using something they just really loved. And yeah, there's no silver bullet, we know that, but just if anybody had something. So thank you so much, everybody, for your input.
Thank you, Maria. That's a great question, and exactly what this network is for. So, and two, when you're looking at those curriculum tools, even if you want to bring some samples to your teacher-based teams, identifying and looking at evidence-based practices and critical needs is a component of what our teacher teams are intended to do. So if you, once again, utilize those infrastructures that you have in place to kind of, get a variety of stakeholders involved, but then also to use that structure so that it's not all on your shoulders, should you choose to. So we didn't really get into interventions today, but I feel okay with that, because I feel like, to y'all's point, we have a lot on our plates and we have a lot of sessions moving forward. And so what I did want to make sure that we touched on was to show y'all this, the Reading Achievement Monitoring Plan Intervention video series. This is a free, quick, easy set of videos, very short, that breaks down the various components of the big ideas of reading, and then gives a video of what it means to provide that instruction explicitly. So an idea that would be, if you're looking for curriculum tools and you're focusing like, hey, we're going to look at, the phonemic awareness component. You could start off by getting everyone on the same page. Let's refresh our memories. What do we need to have as it relates to explicit instruction for phonemic awareness? You could watch that and then, dive into those components. These are great videos, and I just want to mention that there's a summer structured literacy program one coming soon for those needs for some of the gaps that we're seeing based off of the realities with the pandemic and such. My mouse isn't working, I don't know why. The direct link for this is in the Padlet, and I believe, I don't know if I hyperlinked it in this slide, but it is in the Padlet. And the other thing, before we leave, we have our exit survey today that we would really love for you to complete. Where it asks for additional thoughts, let us know where you want to kind of hone in our efforts. We still have interventions to discuss as a team, but then also those implementation considerations. Please put your thoughts there. We can, move away from our scope and sequence to best meet y'all's needs. So like last time, we had mentioned that we have a book that we are going to be giving everyone. We want to offer everyone the opportunity to select a material that you think will be helpful for you as you move forward through this. These are also in the Padlet, but the book options that I kind of briefly showcased to you guys were, I have condensed into a list here. And these are the options that you have kind of to select from. Just because something is the most expensive, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best tool. I think you just need to determine what's going to support kind of maybe your identified priorities. So all of these book options, the link for these book options, as well as the information we need from y'all to know what you are going to select, is all in this form. This is one resource per individual, not per district. So if you are here with a team of individuals and you like people that haven't been in the network are not going to be allowed to, select a resource. But if there's multiple of y'all, maybe you all want the same thing so that you can do a book study and work through it together, whatever it might be. We don't care what you choose, just as long as you choose what is best for you. So we are giving you till March 11th to complete this. The link in the survey or the form that I just dropped is going to give you more details about all the books. So you only really need one link. So you'll just select your book, give us a brief explanation as to why you selected it. And then we need your contact information. We don't know just yet how we're going to distribute these, but once we get what everybody needs and kind of see how many we might have to ship, we might ship it directly to you, or get it out to your various buildings based off of the legwork and the teams that we have going out to y'all throughout the region. So I don't know how that'll come out yet, but we will let you know. You have till March 11th to complete that. And then we do ask that before you go, you also complete the exit survey. As always, I'll follow up afterwards with any additional resources, try to consolidate some of the things that we talked about today into links for the Padlet, and then let you know once I've updated that accordingly. In the meantime, if you have any questions, we are here. We're here to be able to support y'all in a lot of the things that you worked on today. So if you're an identified school, please reach out to us, and we'll see you next month if not. Thanks, y'all.